Marry me by tomorrow morning, and I'll pay you $10,000. The words hung in the empty bakery like smoke, strange and impossible, while the rain hammered against the dark windows of Bluebell Bakery on West 42nd Street. Madeline Hayes stared at the man standing across from her, trying to decide whether he was drunk, dangerous, or simply out of his mind. The fluorescent lights above flickered softly, casting pale shadows across the polished glass display cases filled with leftover cinnamon rolls and half-frosted cupcakes. It was 2:13 a.m., the dead hour of New York City, when even taxis seemed tired and the streets outside looked washed clean of hope. Madeline tightened her grip around the mop handle, her heart thudding hard beneath the oversized blue sweatshirt she wore over her bakery uniform. "I'm sorry, what?" she asked quietly. The man didn't smile. He stood perfectly still in a charcoal wool coat darkened by rainwater, expensive enough to probably cover 6 months of a rent. His dark blonde hair was damp at the edges, and exhaustion lined his face in a way that made him look older than he probably was. But it was his eyes that unsettled her most. Cold, sharp, like a man used to winning every room he entered. Until tonight, he stepped closer and placed 2 things on the counter between them: a silver ring box and a check. $10,000. Madeline's breath caught. "My name is Adrian Cole," he said evenly. "And in less than 12 hours, every news station in America is going to destroy me unless I walk into a courthouse with a wife." Outside, thunder rolled low across Manhattan. Madeline blinked twice, trying to process what she was hearing. Adrian Cole. Even she knew that name. Cole Media Group. Billionaire family. Streaming networks. Newspapers. Luxury hotels. Political interviews. The kind of rich people who appeared on giant screens in Times Square, while people like her cleaned crumbs off tables at 2 in the morning. "This is some kind of joke," she whispered. "I don't joke." His voice stayed calm, almost emotionless, but there was something fraying underneath it. Something desperate. Madeline glanced toward the small television, mounted near the espresso machine. Earlier that night, every channel had been talking about Adrian's public scandal. His fiancée had walked out on him in front of paparazzi outside a charity gala downtown. The footage was everywhere. Headlines calling him cold, controlling, another billionaire with a collapsing empire. She swallowed hard. "Why me?" Adrian looked around the empty bakery for a moment before answering. "Because you're the only person tonight who looked at me like I was human." The words hit her harder than they should have. Earlier, when he first walked in soaked from the rain, she'd handed him a napkin and free coffee because he looked exhausted. That was it. No flirting, no recognition, no cameras, just kindness. And somehow that small moment had led here. Madeline looked down at the check again. $10,000. Enough to stop the eviction notice folded inside her locker upstairs. Enough to cover another month of medication for her 11-year-old brother Owen. Enough to stop the social worker from asking questions about whether she was financially stable enough to keep custody of him. Her stomach twisted painfully. Adrian noticed the hesitation in her eyes. 30 days, he said. Appear with me in public. Wear the ring. Pretend this marriage is real. After that, we divorce quietly and you walk away with the money. And if I say no, Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. Then by tomorrow afternoon, my company loses a merger worth $400 million. Madeline let out a nervous laugh she didn't mean to. That sounds like a you problem. For the first time, something almost human flickered across his face. Tired amusement. It is. Silence settled between them. The bakery smelled like cinnamon, coffee grounds, and warm sugar. Somewhere in the kitchen, the industrial refrigerator hummed softly. Madeline stared at the silver ring box sitting under the fluorescent light. It looked absurd there beside paper coffee cups and stale blueberry muffins. I don't belong in your world, she said finally. Adrian looked directly at her. Neither do I anymore. The honesty in that answer caught her off guard. Rain slid slowly down the windows behind him, blurring the city lights into streaks of gold and white. He suddenly looked less like a billionaire and more like a man standing at the edge of something collapsing. Madeline crossed her arms tightly. You're asking a stranger to marry you. I'm asking you to save my name. His voice lowered slightly. And maybe save yourself too. Her throat tightened. He shouldn't have said that. Because now he'd guessed the truth. The exhaustion beneath her makeup. The overdue notices hidden in her bag. The fear that sat in her chest every single night. She walked home after work wondering if next month would finally be the month everything fell apart. Adrian reached into his coat pocket and slid a folded document toward her. A marriage agreement. Already prepared. Already signed by him. Madeline stared at the signature at the bottom of the page. Adrian Cole. Clean. Precise. Powerful. This man had probably never waited for a subway in his life. Never counted quarters for laundry. Never skipped meals so someone else could eat. And yet somehow, at 2 a.m, in a nearly empty bakery in Manhattan, their lives had collided over coffee and desperation. Adrian glanced at the clock on the wall. 2:19 a.m. If you say yes, he said quietly. We leave in 10 minutes. Madeline did not remember agreeing to leave the bakery. Later, she would replay the moment 100 times in her mind and still fail to understand how her life had changed so completely in less than 20 minutes. 1 second, she had been wiping powdered sugar off a counter at 2 a.m, and the next, she was sitting in the back of a black Mercedes sedan, speeding through rain-soaked Manhattan beside one of the most powerful men in America. The city lights streaked across the tinted windows in blurred ribbons of gold and white, while silence filled the car so heavily it almost pressed against her chest. Madeline kept both hands wrapped tightly around her backpack on her lap. Inside were 2 uniforms, a phone charger held together with tape, and the inhaler Owen sometimes needed at night when his breathing became difficult. Her entire life fit inside that bag. Across from her, Adrian Cole sat with one hand resting against his jaw, staring out the opposite window like a man mentally preparing for war. The driver never spoke. Neither did the woman seated in the front passenger seat with a tablet balanced on her knees. She looked perfectly polished despite the hour, blonde hair smooth, black coat immaculate, expression unreadable. Finally, she turned around slightly. Madeline, I am Vanessa, Mr. Cole's chief of staff. The woman's voice was calm and efficient, the kind that sounded expensive somehow. We have exactly 4 hours before the courthouse opens. During that time, your marriage license will be processed, your public records secured, and your social media accounts temporarily restricted. Madeline blinked. Restricted? Vanessa offered a thin smile. People are going to become very interested in you by sunrise. A cold knot formed in Madeline's stomach. She glanced toward Adrian. This is insane. Yes, he answered without looking at her. It is. The honesty caught her off guard again. Most rich men on television acted untouchable. Adrian just sounded exhausted. The car turned beneath the glowing canopy of an underground parking garage before stopping beside a private elevator. The doors opened directly into a penthouse, so enormous Madeline stopped walking the second she entered. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan like a living painting of silver towers and wet streets. Soft jazz drifted quietly through hidden speakers. Everything smelled faintly of cedarwood and expensive coffee. She looked down automatically at her worn sneakers against the polished marble floor. She had never seen a place like this outside movies. Adrian removed his coat slowly and handed it to a waiting staff member who appeared almost silently from another room. Prepare the guest suite, he said. Then he looked toward Madeline. You should get some sleep. Madeline laughed nervously. Sleep? Her voice echoed lightly through the penthouse. You just asked me to marry you an hour ago. Adrian loosened his tie slightly, the first visible crack in his controlled appearance all night. I know. Do you even do this often? She asked before she could stop herself. 4. The first time, Adrian actually looked at her directly. Tired blue eyes, sharp cheekbones, a face the world probably trusted because it appeared so calm. No, he said quietly. Only on catastrophic evenings. She hated that the answer almost made her smile. Vanessa stepped forward again, holding a folder. There are documents requiring signatures before 6 a.m. Madeline stared down at the stack of papers placed before her on the marble kitchen island. Confidentiality agreements, temporary residency forms, security arrangements, public appearance schedules. Her head spun. Then she saw the final page. Compensation, $10,000 upon completion of 30 calendar days. Her throat tightened. 30 days. She thought about Owen asleep on the pull-out couch at Mrs. Hernandez's apartment 3 blocks from a bakery. She had promised him things would get better soon. But lately soon kept moving further away. "Can I call my brother first?" she asked softly. Adrian immediately nodded. Of course. The answer came easier than she expected. Madeline stepped onto the quiet balcony overlooking the city while rain misted lightly against the railing. Her hands shook as she dialed. Owen answered sleepily on the 3rd ring. "Maddie, hey buddy." She forced warmth into her voice. "Did you take your medicine?" "Yeah." A pause. "You still at work?" Madeline closed her eyes for one painful second. "Not exactly. You sound weird." Children always noticed everything. She leaned against the cold railing. "I just got offered another job. A good one." She looked back through the glass doors toward Adrian, standing silently inside the penthouse kitchen. One hand braced against the counter like the weight of the entire room rested on his shoulders. "I honestly do not know yet," she whispered. Owen yawned softly. "As long as you come home." Her chest ached instantly. "I always come home." When she ended the call, she stood there for several seconds listening to the distant sounds of New York below. Sirens. Tires on wet pavement. A city still awake while her entire future tilted sideways. Behind her, the balcony door slid open quietly. Adrian stepped outside, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Steam curled into the cold night air between them. "Vanessa says you have not signed anything yet," he said carefully. Madeline accepted the coffee slowly. It smelled rich and warm, nothing like the burnt coffee at the bakery. Maybe because this still feels like the beginning of a true crime documentary. To her surprise, Adrian let out a quiet laugh. Low, genuine, brief enough she almost wondered if she imagined it. Then his expression faded again. "You should know something before you decide." Rain tapped softly against the glass behind them. "Tomorrow morning, every camera in this city will be pointed at you," he said. "People will call you names. They will assume you married me for money." Madeline swallowed hard. "Did I?" Adrian studied her face carefully, almost like he genuinely wanted the answer. But she did not answer him, because the terrifying part was she did not know anymore. By 6:15 that morning, Madeline Hayes officially became Mrs. Adrian Cole. The entire ceremony lasted less than 7 minutes. A tired city clerk stood behind a scratched wooden counter inside a nearly empty courthouse office while rain streaked down narrow windows overlooking Lower Manhattan. There were no flowers, no family, no music, just signatures, camera flashes from a private photographer Vanessa had hired, and the heavy feeling that Madeline's real life had somehow slipped quietly out the back door while she was not paying attention. Adrian stood beside her in a perfectly tailored black suit that looked as though it had been made specifically for moments like this. Calm under pressure. Untouchable. Meanwhile, Madeline still felt like a girl who smelled faintly of flour and coffee because she had barely left the bakery 6 hours earlier. She stared down at the silver wedding band now resting against her finger. It fit perfectly. That unsettled her more than anything else. "Congratulations," the clerk said with obvious boredom before stamping another document. Adrian nodded politely while Vanessa collected paperwork with military precision. Then suddenly it was done. Married. Just like that. Madeline stepped outside the courthouse doors and instantly froze. Across the street, dozens of cameras exploded into motion. Bright flashes lit the gray morning like lightning. Reporters shouted over each other while black SUVs lined the curb beneath umbrellas and satellite vans. "Adrian, who is she? Is this a publicity marriage?" "Mr. Cole, is the merger still happening?" Madeline's stomach dropped straight to the sidewalk. "Oh my God." Adrian moved closer immediately, not touching her exactly, but close enough she could feel warmth radiating through his coat sleeve. "Keep walking," he said quietly. "Do not answer questions." She tried, but the noise was overwhelming. Cameras clicking endlessly. Reporters shoving microphones toward her face. Somebody yelled, "How much did he pay you?" The words hit like a slap. Madeline looked down instinctively, shame rising hot into her chest, even though nobody there actually knew the truth. Adrian noticed. His jaw tightened sharply. Then, before she could react, he placed one steady hand against the small of her back and guided her through the crowd toward the waiting SUV. The gesture was simple, controlled, but protective enough to make every camera flash harder. Inside the vehicle, silence crashed down around them the second the doors closed. Madeline stared straight ahead while her breathing struggled to steady. Outside, reporters still chased the car for half a block before disappearing behind rain and traffic. Vanessa glanced up from her tablet. The internet is already melting down. Wonderful, Adrian muttered. Trending #1 on every platform, she continued calmly. Public opinion currently 78% negative toward the marriage. Madeline let out a disbelieving laugh. Only 78? Vanessa almost smiled. You are adapting quickly. Adrian rubbed a hand slowly across his face. Exhaustion clung to him harder than ever now that daylight exposed it fully. Madeline noticed faint shadows beneath his eyes, the kind that came from years of sleeping badly. He looked less like a billionaire this morning and more like a man holding together a collapsing ceiling with his bare hands. What happens now? She asked quietly. Adrian lowered his hand. Now, you become believable. 30 minutes later, Madeline found herself standing inside the largest walk-in closet she had ever seen in her life, while 3 stylists circled her with measuring tape, makeup brushes, and garment bags. Cream tones worked best with her complexion. No harsh jewelry. Elegant but approachable. Their voices blurred together while racks of designer dresses rolled past like scenes from another universe. Madeline stood stiffly in the middle of it all, wearing borrowed slippers and wondering if she had finally lost her mind completely. One stylist held up a silk dress that probably cost more than her yearly rent. This one for the press conference. Madeline nearly choked. There's a press conference? Vanessa answered from across the room without looking up from her phone. In 90 minutes, Madeline stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her blonde hair had been softened into loose waves. Her makeup looked natural, but somehow expensive. The exhausted bakery worker from yesterday had vanished beneath layers of careful styling. She barely recognized herself. I look fake, she whispered. Adrian's voice came quietly from the doorway behind her. No, she turned. He stood there watching her with an unreadable expression. You look terrified. For some reason, that answer made her breathe easier. The stylist quickly disappeared to gather shoes, leaving them briefly alone. Morning light spilled across the room through massive windows overlooking Central Park, now glistening silver from rain. Adrian loosened the cuff of his watch slightly. The press conference will last 10 minutes, he said. Smile when necessary. Stay close to me. And if anyone asks personal questions, let me answer. Madeline crossed her arms tightly. You really think these people are going to believe this marriage is real? Adrian looked at her for a long moment before answering. They do not need to believe we are in love. His voice lowered slightly. They only need to believe I am not alone. The honesty in that sentence settled painfully inside her chest. Not angry, not manipulative, just lonely, deeply lonely. Before she could respond, Vanessa reappeared holding a slim blue box. One final detail. She opened it carefully. Inside rested a diamond ring brilliant enough to catch every ounce of morning light in the room. Madeline's breath caught instantly. That is not fake, she whispered. Vanessa closed the box into her hands gently. No, she said softly. It absolutely is not. The press conference took place inside the glass atrium of Cole Media headquarters at exactly 10:30 that morning, and by then the entire country already seemed to know Madeline Hayes existed. Massive digital screens outside the building flashed photographs of her walking beside Adrian outside the courthouse just hours earlier. Commentators on morning television debated whether the marriage was a strategic distraction or a romantic surprise. Social media accounts had already dug through every public detail of her life they could find. Former classmates, bakery reviews, old photos from community college. It felt terrifying how quickly strangers could turn a person into public entertainment. Madeline stood near the entrance of the atrium, trying not to panic while assistants adjusted microphones and camera crews shouted technical instructions across the polished marble floor. Everywhere she looked, there were expensive suits, glowing screens, and people moving with purpose. Nobody here spilled coffee on their shoes before work or worried about overdue electric bills. She suddenly felt painfully aware of every inch of herself. Adrian stepped beside her moments before they were scheduled to appear. "You are shaking," he said quietly. Madeline forced her hands still against the sides of her cream-colored dress. "There are more cameras in this room than customers I have served in my entire life." A faint flicker of amusement touched his expression. "That is probably true." Somehow the small joke loosened the knot in her chest by half an inch. Vanessa approached holding a tablet. "Your approval numbers are improving slightly." Adrian sighed. "Romantic miracle? No, Vanessa ancercamli. People simply enjoy attractive disasters." Madeline nearly laughed despite herself. Then the ballroom doors opened. The noise hit instantly. Hundreds of reporters surged forward while flashes exploded across the room in endless bursts of white light. Adrian's posture changed immediately beside her. Straighter, colder, like a man stepping back into armor he wore too often. He offered her his arm without looking directly at her. Madeline hesitated only a second before placing her hand lightly against it. The contact sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. Together they walked toward the stage beneath a storm of cameras and shouted questions. "Mr. Cole, when did you meet your wife? Was your previous engagement fake? Madeline, are you pregnant?" Her cheeks burned instantly. Adrian's jaw hardened. "Enough," he said sharply into the microphone before the room could spiral further. Silence dropped quickly. It startled her how powerful his voice was when he truly used it. Adrian looked out across the crowd with controlled calm. "This morning I married Madeline Hayes because she is the person I trust most in this world." Madeline turned toward him slightly in shock. That line had not been in the prepared briefing Vanessa gave them upstairs. Cameras flashed harder. Reporters leaned forward eagerly. Adrian continued smoothly. "The last few months have involved personal challenges and intense public scrutiny. However, my private life will remain private moving forward." One reporter stood immediately. "Mr. Cole, many are accusing your wife of marrying you for money." Madeline's stomach dropped. Adrian did not even blink. "Many people confuse kindness with opportunism," he replied evenly. "That says more about them than it does about my wife." Wife. The word landed strangely every single time he said it. Another reporter shouted, "Madeline, what exactly do you love about Adrian Cole?" Panic flickered through her instantly. This had not been rehearsed either. Every camera in the room swung toward her. She could practically feel millions of strangers waiting for her answer. Madeline swallowed hard and looked toward Adrian. For the first time all morning, he seemed uncertain too. Waiting. Then something strange happened. Instead of seeing the billionaire from magazine covers, she saw the exhausted man standing alone in her bakery at 2 in the morning, holding a cup of coffee like it was the only warm thing left in his life. The answer slipped out before she could overthink it. "He notices people," she said softly. The room went still. Madeline's voice grew steadier. "Most powerful people stop seeing anyone outside their world after a while. But Adrian notices when somebody is tired, or scared, or trying hard not to fall apart." Adrian looked at her fully then, something unreadable flickering behind his blue eyes. Madeline realized too late that she had accidentally told the truth. The room erupted with questions again, but Vanessa immediately stepped forward, ending the conference before anyone could push further. Security escorted them quickly through a side corridor away from the noise. The second the doors closed behind them, silence rushed in. Adrian stopped walking. So did Madeline. For one long second, neither spoke. Then Adrian let out a quiet breath. "You were not supposed to say that." Embarrassment flooded her face instantly. "I know. I am sorry. I just panicked." But to her surprise, Adrian shook his head slowly. No, his voice had softened. You made people believe us." The words should have felt like victory. Instead, they settled strangely deep inside her chest. Because for one dangerous moment on that stage, she had almost believed them too. Later that afternoon, after hours of interviews and public appearances, Madeline finally escaped into the massive penthouse kitchen, looking completely exhausted. She slipped off her heels with relief and padded barefoot across the marble floor toward the refrigerator. Everything inside looked impossibly expensive and perfectly organized. She found eggs, butter, cinnamon, and heavy cream. Familiar things, human things. Almost without thinking, she began baking. 40 minutes later, the scent of warm cinnamon rolls drifted softly through the penthouse. Madeline tied each pastry box carefully with thin blue ribbons she found in one of the drawers. It was something she had always done at the bakery, a tiny detail customers loved. She did not notice Adrian standing silently in the doorway watching her until he finally spoke. "What are you doing?" She startled slightly before holding up the tray. "Making food that tastes like actual happiness." To her surprise, Adrian smiled. Not the controlled public smile from television. A real one. Small and tired and completely unguarded. And somehow, in that enormous, lonely penthouse overlooking Manhattan, it changed the entire room. For the next 2 weeks, Madeline Hayes learned how exhausting it was to pretend to belong to someone else's world. Every morning began with schedules prepared by Vanessa down to the minute. Charity breakfasts, interviews, gallery openings, investor dinners, public appearances where cameras followed Adrian and Madeline everywhere like hungry shadows waiting for a mistake. She learned how to smile without looking nervous, how to answer personal questions without revealing anything real, and how to survive inside rooms filled with people who measured human value by bank accounts and last names. But the strangest part was not the luxury. It was Adrian. In public, he remained controlled and polished, the exact billionaire the world expected him to be. Calm voice, perfect posture, sharp answers. Yet behind closed doors, small cracks kept appearing in the carefully constructed version of Adrian Cole everyone else believed existed. Madeline noticed the way he loosened his tie the second elevators closed. The way he rubbed his temples during late-night conference calls. The way silence followed him around the penthouse like something permanent. One night, she found him standing alone in the dark kitchen at nearly 3 a.m, staring blankly at the city skyline while the microwave clock glowed pale green beside him. "You know, normal people sleep at this hour, right?" she asked softly. Adrian glanced toward her without surprise, almost as though he had expected her to appear. "Normal people probably do." Madeline crossed the marble floor barefoot, wearing oversized sweatpants and one of the sweaters Vanessa had ordered for her. "You have not slept properly once since I got here." Adrian looked back toward the windows. "Sleep wastes time. That sounds deeply unhealthy." A faint breath of amusement escaped him. "You sound like my doctor." Madeline opened a refrigerator and pulled out ingredients automatically. Butter, cinnamon, dough she had prepared earlier. Baking relaxed her. It reminded her of normal life before cameras and designer dresses and pretending. "My mother used to bake when she was stressed," she said quietly while tying her hair back. She said warm food makes people feel less lonely. Adrian leaned one shoulder lightly against the kitchen counter. "Did it work?" Madeline paused briefly. Sometimes, silence settled comfortably around them while she rolled dough across the marble island. For the first time since entering his world, the penthouse did not feel cold, just quiet. Adrian watched her hands carefully. "You always tie those blue ribbons the same way." Madeline glanced up. "You noticed that? You do not realize how often people reveal themselves through repetition." His voice softened slightly. "The ribbons matter to you." She smiled faintly while wrapping another cinnamon box carefully. Customers at the bakery used to say they looked hopeful. Adrian looked down at the ribbon between her fingers for a long moment before answering. "Maybe they do." Something about the way he said it made her chest tighten unexpectedly. Later that week, Adrian insisted on accompanying Madeline to Brooklyn to visit Owen after school. The moment their black SUV stopped outside the modest apartment building, Neighbors immediately began peeking through curtains and whispering. Cameras had not followed them there, thankfully, but attention still clung to Adrian everywhere he went. Madeline stepped out first, nervous energy buzzing through her chest. "You do not have to come upstairs," she told him quietly. Adrian adjusted the cuff of his coat. "Your brother thinks I am your husband." "Fake husband," she corrected automatically. Adrian's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Right." The answer landed strangely between them. Upstairs, Owen nearly dropped his video game controller when Adrian entered the apartment carrying grocery bags and medicine for the pharmacy downstairs. "No way," Owen whispered, staring at him with wide eyes. "You are really Adrian Cole." Adrian offered, his hand seriously. "You must be Owen." The 11-year-old shook it carefully like he was meeting the president. Mrs. Hernandez nearly cried when Adrian repaired the broken kitchen cabinet hinge in under 5 minutes using tools from his car. Madeline stood frozen in the doorway, watching the scene unfold. It made no sense. Billionaires were not supposed to kneel on apartment floors, tightening loose screws, while children asked them questions about basketball. Yet Adrian did exactly that. Naturally, quietly, like he needed the normalcy as much as they did. That night, back at the penthouse, Madeline found herself studying him differently during dinner. The massive dining room felt less intimidating now, less staged. Adrian loosened his sleeves slightly while reviewing documents beside his untouched plate. "What?" he asked without looking up. Madeline blinked. "What do you mean?" "You have been staring at me for 30 seconds. Embarrassment warmed her cheeks instantly. "I was just trying to figure you out." Adrian finally lowered the papers. "And?" Madeline hesitated. "You're not who people think you are." Something unreadable flickered behind his eyes. Not amusement this time. Something sadder. More tired. "Neither are you." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed sharply across the table. Adrian glanced down at the screen. His entire expression hardened immediately. Cold again. Controlled again. "I have to take this." He stood and walked toward his office without another word. The warmth disappeared from the room the second he left. Madeline stared down at the half-finished cinnamon roll on her plate, suddenly aware of how dangerous this arrangement was becoming. Because somewhere between fake interviews, late-night baking, and watching Adrian quietly repair kitchen cabinets in Brooklyn, the lines had started blurring. And the terrifying part was she no longer knew which moments between them were pretend anymore. 3 nights later, Madeline stood in front of the mirror inside her penthouse bedroom while a stylist adjusted the final pin in her hair for the Cole Foundation Winter Gala. Snow drifted softly outside the towering windows overlooking Manhattan, turning the city silver beneath the evening lights. Somewhere downstairs, an orchestra rehearsed quietly inside the ballroom of the Cole Grand Hotel, where nearly 400 guests were gathering for one of the most important charity events of the year. Vanessa had already warned her twice. Tonight mattered. Investors would attend. Board members would attend. Adrian's mother would attend. Madeline smoothed her hands nervously over the dark emerald gown draped against her frame. It was elegant without trying too hard, the kind of dress that made her look older, calmer, more polished than she felt inside. But no amount of silk or diamonds could erase the fact that 2 months ago she had been working overnight shifts at a bakery wondering whether she could afford groceries. A soft knock sounded at the door. "Come in," she called quietly. Adrian stepped inside wearing a black tuxedo that somehow made the entire room look sharper around him. For one brief second, he simply stared at her, completely silent. Madeline's heartbeat stumbled awkwardly. "What?" she asked nervously. Adrian blinked once, almost like he had forgotten how to speak. "Nothing." His voice came quieter than usual. "You just look." He stopped himself. Madeline smiled faintly. Terrified, a small breath of laughter escaped him. "Actually, no." The answer settled warmly into her chest before she could stop it. Adrian crossed the room slowly and held out a velvet jewelry box. Inside rested a delicate diamond bracelet shimmering beneath the bedroom lights. Madeline looked up immediately. "Adrian, this is too much." "It belonged to my grandmother," he said carefully. "My mother hates it because she said it was too simple." His expression softened almost invisibly. "I thought you would wear it better." Madeline stared down at the bracelet for a long second before allowing him to fasten it gently around her wrist. His fingers brushed her skin only briefly, but the touch lingered longer than it should have. Neither of them moved away immediately afterward. The moment stretched quietly between them until Vanessa's voice suddenly echoed from the hallway. "The board members are arriving." Reality crashed back instantly. Adrian stepped away first. Controlled again. Distant again. "Ready?" he asked. Madeline took one slow breath. Not even a little. The ballroom downstairs looked like something from another universe. Crystal chandeliers glowed above polished marble floors, while servers carried silver trays through crowds dressed in gowns and tuxedos worth more than cars. A massive ice sculpture shimmered beside the stage beneath soft golden lighting. Everywhere Madeline turned, there were politicians, celebrities, investors, and socialites smiling with practiced perfection. The moment Adrian and Madeline entered together, conversations shifted instantly. Heads turned. Cameras flashed. Adrian rested one steady hand lightly against the middle of her back as they moved through the crowd. "Remember," he murmured quietly beside her ear, "half the people in this room only care about power." Madeline glanced sideways at him. "And the other half?" Adrian's mouth curved faintly. "They care about who is losing it." Before she could answer, a tall, elegant woman approached them, wearing a silver gown sharp enough to look almost dangerous. Her blonde hair was swept perfectly into place, and her diamond earrings probably cost more than the bakery where Madeline used to work. Even before Adrian spoke, Madeline knew exactly who she was. "Mother." Adrian's voice turned noticeably cooler. Victoria Cole's eyes slid toward Madeline slowly, assessing every inch of her like a business problem requiring evaluation. "So this is the girl. Girl, not woman, not wife." Madeline felt the insult immediately. Adrian's posture stiffened beside her. "Madeline," he corrected evenly. Victoria smiled without warmth. "Of course." Her gaze returned to Madeline's bracelet. "Interesting choice. Adrian rarely shares family heirlooms with temporary people." The words landed carefully, deliberately. Madeline forced herself not to react. Adrian's jaw tightened sharply. "That is enough." Victoria ignored him completely. "Tell me, Madeline," she continued smoothly, "how does it feel waking up one morning and suddenly becoming rich?" Around them, nearby conversations had begun quieting. People were listening now, watching, waiting. Madeline suddenly understood this was not just humiliation. It was a test, a public one. She felt Adrian shift slightly closer beside her, almost protective, but something inside her straightened instead. Calmly, quietly. "Honestly," she answered softly. Victoria lifted one perfect eyebrow. Madeline held her gaze steadily. "The strange part is not the money." Silence spread around them. "It is realizing how many wealthy people confuse cruelty with sophistication." A few nearby guests nearly choked on their champagne. Adrian looked at her sharply in surprise. Victoria's expression hardened instantly. Madeline continued before fear could stop her. "I spent years serving coffee to exhausted nurses, single parents, construction workers, and people working double shifts just to survive. Most of them treated me with more kindness than anyone I've met in rooms like this." Her voice stayed calm, gentle even. "So, if being rich means forgetting how to treat people like human beings," she glanced briefly around the ballroom, "then maybe wealth is not as impressive as everyone here thinks." Complete silence followed. Then somewhere behind them, a man quietly began clapping. Others slowly joined. Adrian stared at Madeline like he had never seen her clearly before this exact moment. Victoria's face tightened with contained fury before she turned sharply and disappeared back into the crowd. Madeline finally exhaled shakily. "Well," she whispered under her breath, "I think your mother officially hates me now." Adrian did not answer immediately. His blue eyes remained fixed on her with an intensity that suddenly made her pulse quicken. Then, very softly, he said the one thing she least expected to hear from him. I do not think I have ever admired anyone more. The moment that changed everything happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, 3 days after the gala. Madeline had returned early from a foundation luncheon because Owen had a doctor appointment in Brooklyn, and for the first time in weeks the penthouse was unusually quiet. No assistants, no camera crews, no meetings echoing through Adrian's office. Just soft rain tapping against the windows while Manhattan disappeared beneath gray clouds outside. Madeline moved through the apartment barefoot, carrying a cup of tea, finally able to breathe without feeling watched. She passed Adrian's office slowly and noticed the door sitting slightly open. Normally it stayed closed during work calls. Today the room was empty. His laptop remained open on the desk beside stacks of financial reports and neatly organized folders. Madeline should have kept walking. She knew that immediately. But then she saw Owen's name. Her heartbeat stumbled hard. A medical file rested partially beneath one of the folders, the hospital logo visible across the top corner. Confused, Madeline stepped closer. Owen Hayes, cardiology department. Her stomach tightened instantly. She opened the file carefully with trembling fingers. Inside were invoices, payment confirmations, treatment schedules, thousands of dollars in charges already marked paid in full. Her vision blurred for a second. That was impossible. She had spent months fighting insurance companies, delaying appointments, working overnight shifts trying to afford medication for Owen's condition. Nobody paid bills like these by accident. Slowly, she turned another page. A transfer authorization signed nearly 6 weeks earlier. Adrian Cole. Madeline felt the blood drain from her face. 6 weeks. Before the wedding. Before the courthouse. Before the contract. Footsteps echoed quietly down the hallway behind her. Adrian entered the office, loosening the sleeve of his dress shirt before stopping cold the second he saw the file in her hands. Silence crashed into the room instantly. Madeline, his voice lowered carefully. Too carefully. She looked up slowly. You paid for Owen's treatments? Adrian did not answer immediately, and somehow that hurt worse. Because silence meant yes. Rain tapped softly against the massive windows, while tension thickened between them like something alive. How long? She whispered. Adrian exhaled once. Since the week before we met. Madeline stared at him in disbelief. You knew about Owen before the bakery? Adrian stepped closer slowly, cautious now in a way she had never seen before. Vanessa ran a background report after I asked for your name. Her chest tightened painfully. You investigated me. I needed to know who I was bringing into this situation. His voice remained calm, but guilt flickered visibly behind his eyes now. Real guilt. Madeline laughed softly in disbelief, tears already threatening behind her eyes. So that is what this was? She whispered. You found the desperate girl with a sick little brother and decided she would be easier to convince. Adrian's expression hardened instantly. No, then why? Her voice cracked harder this time. Why would you pay for his treatment without telling me? Adrian ran a hand slowly across his face, exhaustion pulling at every line in his expression. Because you were drowning. The answer came quietly. Honestly, and I could help. Madeline shook her head immediately. No, you wanted leverage. That is not true. Is it not? Tears finally slipped free despite how hard she fought them. You knew exactly what $10,000 meant to me. You knew what losing Owen would do to me. And all this time, her voice trembled. All this time, I thought maybe you actually cared. Adrian stepped toward her again. I do care. The words hit too hard. Too fast. Madeline backed away instantly. Do not. Her voice lowered sharply. Do not stand there and say that now. Silence filled the office except for rain and the distant hum of city traffic below. Adrian's blue eyes darkened with something painfully close to regret. I never meant for you to find out like this. Madeline wiped angrily at her tears. That is your problem, Adrian. Everything with you is managed. Controlled. Even kindness. The accusation landed visibly. He flinched almost imperceptibly. You think I paid for Owen because I wanted something from you? He asked quietly. Madeline looked at him for a long second, her chest aching so badly she could barely breathe around it. I think you are a man so terrified of being abandoned that you try to buy reasons for people to stay. Complete silence followed. Adrian did not deny it. That frightened her most of all. She suddenly remembered every expensive gift, every carefully timed rescue, every moment he stepped in before she could struggle alone. None of it felt simple anymore. None of it felt safe. Madeline slowly removed the diamond bracelet from her wrist and placed it carefully on the desk beside Owen's file. Adrian's expression shifted instantly. Madeline, I cannot do this right now. Her voice broke softly. I do not know what is real anymore. He looked devastated suddenly. Not angry, not defensive, just tired in a way that made him seem heartbreakingly human. The way I feel about you is real. The confession landed quietly between them, almost swallowed by the sound of rain. Madeline closed her eyes for one painful second because part of her wanted desperately to believe him. That was the problem. She wanted to believe him too much. When she opened her eyes again, Adrian still stood there watching her like a man realizing too late that money could solve almost everything except the one thing he actually needed. Madeline picked up her backpack slowly from the chair near the door. The same worn backpack she had carried into his life weeks earlier. Somehow it felt heavier now. I need space, she whispered. Adrian nodded once. Barely. Like even that movement cost him something. Madeline walked past him toward the elevator without looking back. But just before the doors closed, she caught one final glimpse of Adrian standing alone inside the office beside the untouched bracelet and the stack of medical bills he had paid in secret. For the first time since meeting him, the billionaire looked completely powerless. For 3 days, Adrian Cole did not call. No messages, no flowers, no dramatic apologies waiting outside apartment buildings in the rain like something from a movie. And somehow that silence hurt Madeline more than if he had fought harder. She returned to Brooklyn with Owen and tried to slip back into normal life, but normal no longer fit properly around her. The bakery smelled the same. The subway still screeched through dark tunnels every morning. Bills still waited on kitchen counters. Yet everything felt strangely smaller now, like her world had expanded too far to shrink back into place again. Customers recognized her. Constantly. Some whispered. Some stared openly. A few asked for photographs. Online articles still called her the bakery bride and debated whether her marriage would survive the month. Madeline ignored all of it as best she could. During slow hours at Bluebell Bakery, she kneaded dough aggressively while trying not to think about Adrian standing alone in that office looking more wounded than angry. The problem was not that he had helped Owen. Deep down she knew that. The problem was that he had helped quietly while hiding the truth because somewhere inside himself he believed honesty would make people leave. And the worst part was, maybe he had been right. Late Friday afternoon, snow drifted softly outside the bakery windows while Madeline tied blue ribbons around pastry boxes near the register. Her phone buzzed against the counter. Vanessa. Madeline hesitated before answering. Hello. Vanessa's usually calm voice sounded strained for the first time. You need to turn on the television. A cold feeling spread instantly through Madeline's chest. Why? Silence. Then Vanessa answered quietly. Because Adrian is about to destroy his entire career for you. The small television above the espresso machine already blared breaking news coverage when Madeline looked up. Reporters gather outside federal hearing for Cole media investigation. Footage flashed across the screen showing black SUVs pulling up outside a downtown courthouse surrounded by cameras and crowds despite the snowstorm. Commentators spoke rapidly over one another. Sources claim Cole Media executives are preparing emergency damage control. Speculation continues surrounding the legitimacy of Adrian Cole's recent marriage. Some investors reportedly urge Cole to distance himself publicly from his wife in order to stabilize the merger. Madeline's stomach dropped hard. What is happening? She whispered into the phone. Vanessa lowered her voice further. Board members want Adrian to publicly frame the marriage as your idea. Madeline went completely still. What? They prepared statements implying you manipulated him for financial gain. Vanessa paused briefly. If he signs them, the merger survives. Snow swirled outside the bakery windows while panic rushed through Madeline's chest. And if he does not, silence again. He could lose everything. The television cut suddenly to live footage inside the courthouse lobby. Reporters crowded behind security barriers while flashes exploded endlessly across marble walls. Then Adrian appeared, black wool coat, snow dusting his shoulders. Exhaustion carved deeply into his face now, but his posture remained steady as he approached the podium prepared for the press conference. Madeline forgot how to breathe for a moment. He looked thinner somehow, more tired than she had ever seen him. A reporter shouted immediately, "Mr. Cole, did your wife deceive you into marriage?" Another voice followed. "Were you pressured into paying her family's expenses?" Adrian stopped behind the podium slowly. Cameras flashed hard enough to turn the entire screen white for seconds at a time. Then silence settled across the room. Adrian looked directly toward the cameras with calm blue eyes that no longer seemed cold. "Just honest. Finally honest. Several people have advised me today to protect my company by blaming my wife for our marriage," he said evenly. Madeline's chest tightened painfully. Adrian continued, "I will not be doing that." The room erupted instantly with shouted questions, but Adrian raised one hand slightly. Quiet returned. "Madeline Hayes never manipulated me," he said firmly. "If anyone used money to influence this relationship, it was me." Madeline's eyes filled instantly. Inside the bakery, even the customers had stopped moving to watch the screen. Adrian exhaled slowly before continuing. "I met a woman who treated me with kindness when I had done absolutely nothing to deserve it. And instead of trusting that kindness, I tried to secure it, control it, manage it." His voice lowered slightly, because somewhere along the way, I forgot that love cannot be negotiated like a business contract. Complete silence filled the courthouse lobby. Adrian glanced briefly down at the prepared statement resting on the podium before pushing it aside completely. "The contract between us was real," he admitted quietly, "but my feelings for her stopped being fake a long time ago." Madeline pressed one trembling hand against her mouth. Snow fell heavier outside, while tears blurred her vision. Adrian looked exhausted now. Human, stripped bare in front of the entire country. "I spent most of my life believing people only stayed if I gave them something valuable enough," he continued softly. "Money, security, opportunities. But Madeline," his voice nearly broke for the first time, "Madeline made me realize the loneliest people in the world are often the ones trying hardest to buy reasons not to be abandoned." Even the reporters had gone silent now. Adrian stepped back from the podium slowly. "So, if protecting my company requires destroying her reputation," he shook his head once, "then I am done protecting the company." Gasps echoed through the crowd instantly. Commentators began shouting over one another on television. Stock analysts, legal experts, chaos. But Adrian ignored all of it. He removed the microphone from his jacket calmly and placed it on the podium beside the unsigned statement. Then he walked away. Just walked away from cameras, executives, investors, and millions of dollars like none of it mattered anymore. Madeline stood frozen behind the bakery counter staring at the television while snow covered the city outside in soft white silence. Because for the first time since meeting Adrian Cole, she believed every single word he had said. 6 months later, the first snow of December drifted softly across Brooklyn while warm yellow lights glowed through the front windows of a small bakery on the corner of Bergen Street. A painted wooden sign above the door read blue ribbon in elegant navy lettering, and beneath it hung a tiny brass bell that chimed every time customers stepped inside from the cold. The bakery smelled like cinnamon, sugar, and fresh bread before sunrise every morning now. Madeline Hayes stood behind the front counter, tying thin blue ribbons around pastry boxes while Christmas music played quietly from an old speaker near the kitchen. Her apron had flour on it again. Her cheeks stayed pink from working beside warm ovens all day. And for the first time in years, exhaustion no longer felt hopeless. Owen sat near the window, finishing homework between customers while occasionally stealing cookies from cooling trays when he thought she was not looking. "I saw that," Madeline called without glancing up. Owen grinned immediately. "You did not see anything. She laughed softly and tossed a dish towel toward him. Life had not become perfect after the courthouse confession. Adrian's decision had cost him enormously. The merger collapsed within days. Several board members resigned publicly. Financial headlines called him reckless. Analysts predicted the end of his career. Yet strangely, public opinion slowly shifted afterward. Not because he was rich, but because people recognized honesty when they saw it, especially the kind that cost something real. Madeline had not spoken to Adrian for nearly 2 months after the hearing. Not because she hated him. That was the problem. She could not hate him anymore after seeing him stand in front of the entire world and finally tell the truth without hiding behind money or control. Eventually, the silence between them simply became unbearable. The first message Adrian sent was painfully simple. No grand speech. No gifts. Just one sentence. I hope the bakery opens someday. Madeline stared at that text for nearly an hour before crying quietly in the stockroom where nobody could see her. 2 weeks later, anonymous investors helped secure the lease for Blue Ribbon Bakery. Madeline knew exactly who the anonymous investor was immediately. But this time, Adrian never tried to take credit. That mattered. Snowflakes swirled outside the windows while the evening crowd slowly disappeared one customer at a time. By 7:30, only soft jazz and the hum of ovens remained. Madeline wiped down the counter while Owen stacked chairs nearby. You should go home, she told him gently. Mrs. Hernandez is waiting. Owen narrowed his eyes suspiciously. You just want all the leftover cinnamon rolls for yourself. Madeline gasped dramatically. That is a terrible accusation. He grinned before grabbing his backpack and coat. Just before opening the bakery door, he paused. You know he still comes by. Sometimes, right? Madeline froze slightly. Who? Owen gave her a look only 11-year-old boys could manage. Seriously? Her heartbeat quickened instantly. Owen, he came in last week when you were upstairs fixing the freezer. Owen shrugged casually. Bought 6 muffins. Tipped like a crazy person. Madeline stared at him, speechless, while snow drifted quietly beyond the glass windows. Why did you not tell me? Owen smiled softly this time. Because you looked happy again, and I think he was waiting until you were ready. Then he disappeared out into the snowy Brooklyn evening before she could ask anything else. Silence settled gently through the bakery afterward. Madeline stood completely still beside the counter while emotions tangled painfully inside her chest. Outside, people hurried past beneath umbrellas and winter coats while Christmas lights reflected against wet sidewalks. She looked down absent-mindedly at the blue ribbon in her hands. Then the brass bell above the bakery door chimed softly. Madeline turned instinctively. Adrian Cole stood just inside the doorway with snow dusting the shoulders of his dark wool coat. For one long second, neither of them moved. He looked different now somehow. Still elegant. Still unmistakably Adrian, but softer around the edges. Less guarded. Less lonely. His blue eyes found hers quietly across the warm bakery light. You changed the sign, he said softly. Madeline glanced toward the front window automatically. The old one was crooked. Adrian's mouth curved slightly. I liked the crooked one. The familiar warmth in his voice made her chest ache instantly. He stepped closer slowly, careful not to push too hard this time. In his hands, he carried a small worn box, tied carefully with thin blue ribbon. Madeline recognized the knot immediately. What is that? She whispered. Adrian placed the box gently on the counter between them. Open it. Her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted the lid. Inside rested dozens of blue ribbons folded neatly together. Some slightly wrinkled, some faded, some still dusted faintly with flour. Madeline looked up at him in shock. Adrian gave a small, helpless shrug. I kept every one. Emotion tightened painfully in her throat. Why? Adrian looked at her the way people look at home after being lost for a very long time. Because they reminded me of the first place I ever felt like a person instead of a transaction. Silence wrapped softly around them while snow continued falling outside. Madeline blinked quickly against sudden tears. Adrian reached slowly into his coat pocket, then removed a small velvet ring box. This time there were no contracts, no cameras, no reporters waiting outside, just warm bakery light